Everyone's talking about colonizing Mars. Elon Musk says we'll have 1 million people there by 2050. NASA's planning crewed missions. The entire world seems convinced that Mars is humanity's backup planet. But what if I told you that the laws of physics, biology, and even time itself are conspiring against us? What if the red planet is not our future home, but instead the greatest mirage in human history? Today, we're going to explore the brutal scientific realities that nobody wants to talk about. The reasons why Mars might forever remain just a beautiful light in our night sky. If you're ready to question everything you've been told about humanity's future in space and explore the real science behind our cosmic limitations, hit that subscribe button and give this video a thumbs up. And one quick question: if you could change one thing about the universe, what would it be? Let me know in the comments down below. I will pin the most creative answer. Now let's begin. Before we dive into why Mars is impossible, let's acknowledge something important. The human spirit that drives us to even attempt this is magnificent. We're the species that looked at the ocean and built boats. We looked at the sky and built planes. Now we look at Mars and build rockets. This ambition is encoded in our DNA, inherited from ancestors who left Africa and populated every corner of Earth. But Mars isn't just another continent, it's a whole different world. And the challenges are not just harder, they might be fundamentally different from anything we've ever faced. And let's start with the journey itself. Mars is, on average, 225 million kilometers from Earth, but that number is deceiving because both planets are moving. When Mars is closest to Earth, it's about 55 million kilometers away. At its farthest, it's over 400 million kilometers. This dance of planets means we can't just fly to Mars whenever we want. We have launch windows that come around every 26 months, when the planetary alignment is right. The fastest spacecraft we've ever sent to Mars was NASA's New Horizons, which passed by Mars at 58,000 kilometers per hour on its way to Pluto. But even at that incredible speed, and even at Mars's closest approach, the journey would take over 30 days. But here's the catch: we can't travel that fast with humans on board. A crewed mission would need massive amounts of fuel, life support, supplies, and radiation shielding. All that mass means traveling much slower. Current NASA plans estimate a journey time of about 9 months each way. 9 months trapped in a metal can exposed to cosmic radiation, with your bones weakening and muscles atrophying every single day. The Apollo missions to the Moon took 3 days. 3 days versus 9 months. That's not just a longer trip. It's a fundamentally different challenge that pushes human physiology to its breaking point. But the real killer isn't the distance, it's the radiation. Earth's magnetic field and atmosphere protect us from the constant bombardment of cosmic rays and solar particles. The moment you leave Earth's protective bubble, you're exposed to radiation levels that would be illegal for nuclear power plant workers. NASA's Curiosity rover measured radiation levels during its journey to Mars. The round-trip dose would be about 660 millisieverts. That's like getting a full-body CT scan every 5 days for a year and a half. This radiation doesn't just increase cancer risk, it damages the central nervous system, potentially causing cognitive problems, memory loss, and motor function issues. Recent studies on mice exposed to cosmic radiation showed significant brain damage and behavioral changes. The particles literally punch holes through DNA, through neurons, through the very cells that make you who you are. And there's no practical shielding. To stop cosmic rays, you'd need meters of lead or water, making your spacecraft impossibly heavy. The radiation problem gets worse on Mars itself. Mars has no global magnetic field and an atmosphere just 1% as thick as Earth's. Standing on the Martian surface, you'd receive about 230 microsieverts per day. That's like getting a chest X-ray every 3 days. Over a 2-year mission, you'd accumulate enough radiation to significantly increase your risk of cancer, cataracts, and sterility. Your DNA would be under constant assault, but let's say we solve the radiation problem with some future technology. The next challenge is gravity, or rather the lack of it. Mars' gravity is 38% of Earth's. That might sound nice. You could jump 3 times higher, but your body evolved over millions of years for Earth gravity. Every system in your body expects and requires Earth's gravitational pull to function properly. In microgravity, astronauts lose about 1% of their bone mass per month. On the International Space Station, with rigorous exercise regimens, astronauts still return to Earth with significant bone and muscle loss after just 6 months. Mars gravity would slow this deterioration, but not stop it. After years on Mars, your bones would be so brittle and your muscles so weak that returning to Earth might be physically impossible. You'd be medically trapped on Mars. The gravity problem extends to pregnancy and child development. No mammal has ever been conceived and born in reduced gravity. We have no idea if human pregnancy is even possible on Mars. The development of bones, muscles, the cardiovascular system, even the inner ear that controls balance, all of these require Earth gravity. A child born on Mars might have a heart too weak to pump blood against Earth's gravity. They might never be able to visit the planet their species came from. We could be creating a permanent underclass of humans who are prisoners of Mars's weak gravity. But even if we could handle the radiation and gravity, there's a more insidious killer waiting: the dust. Mars dust isn't like Earth dust. It's incredibly fine, particles just 3 micrometers across, small enough to penetrate deep into your lungs. It's also electrostatic, meaning it sticks to everything. But worst of all, it's toxic. The Martian soil contains perchlorates at levels about 10,000 times higher than what's considered safe on Earth. Perchlorates interfere with thyroid function, disrupting hormone production and potentially causing developmental problems in children. This dust gets into everything. The Mars rovers, Spirit and Opportunity, were supposed to last 90 days, but survived for years partly due to lucky wind events that cleaned their solar panels. But humans can't count on lucky winds. Every time you'd enter a habitat after a walk on Mars, you'd bring this toxic dust with you. It would accumulate in your habitat, in your equipment, in your lungs. NASA hasn't figured out how to keep this dust out. It's like trying to live in a world made of poisonous talcum powder that's also magnetic. The thin atmosphere of Mars creates another set of supposedly impossible challenges. At less than 1% of Earth's atmospheric pressure, your blood would literally boil if you were exposed to it without a pressure suit. You couldn't just walk outside with an oxygen mask like in some sci-fi movies. You need a full pressure suit every single time, and these suits are complex machines that can and do fail. One small tear, one faulty seal, and you're dead in under a minute. This thin atmosphere also means Mars can't hold heat. The temperature at the equator in summer might reach a comfortable 20 degrees Celsius at noon, but at night it plummets to -73 degrees Celsius. At the poles in winter, it gets cold enough for carbon dioxide to freeze out of the atmosphere, -125 degrees Celsius. These temperature swings happen every single solar Martian day, putting incredible stress on equipment and habitats. Growing food on Mars presents challenges that make Antarctica look like paradise. The Martian soil isn't just toxic with perchlorates, it's also missing crucial nutrients and beneficial bacteria that Earth plants need. The lower gravity affects how water moves through soil and how roots grow. The reduced sunlight Mars receives only 43% of the solar energy Earth gets, means most Earth plants simply couldn't photosynthesize enough energy to survive. Matt Damon's character in The Martian grew potatoes in Martian soil mixed with human waste. In reality, those potatoes would be poisoned with perchlorates and probably wouldn't grow at all due to the lack of beneficial soil microbes. You'd need to bring Earth soil or create it artificially, but soil is a living ecosystem with thousands of species of bacteria, fungi, and other microorganisms. Recreating that ecosystem on Mars might be impossible. Water on Mars is another massive challenge. Yes, there's water ice at the poles and probably underground, but extracting it requires enormous energy. You need to dig through frozen regolith harder than concrete, melt the ice, and then purify water that's likely contaminated with perchlorates and other toxic minerals. The energy requirements alone make large-scale water extraction problematic. And unlike Earth, where the water cycle purifies and redistributes water naturally, on Mars you'd need to artificially manage every drop. The psychological challenges might be the worst of all. Mars is, on average, 14 light minutes from Earth. That means a conversation with Earth would have a 28-minute delay minimum. You say, "Hello," and you wait 28 minutes for a response. No real-time conversations with loved ones, no live tech support, no immediate help in emergencies. You're more isolated than any human has ever been. The Mars 500 experiment locked 6 volunteers in a simulated Mars habitat for 520 days. Even with the knowledge they could leave any time, with full communication with the outside world, with no real danger, the psychological stress was severe. Crew members experienced depression, sleep disorders, and increasing conflicts. One crew member simply stopped participating, staying in bed for days. And this was on Earth, with Earth gravity, Earth air, and the knowledge that home was just outside the door. On actual Mars, there's no escape. If someone has a mental breakdown, you can't send them home. If crew members develop irreconcilable conflicts, they're stuck together. The visual monotony alone, red rocks and pink sky forever, could drive people insane. Humans need nature, variety, and the chaos of life. Mars is dead, uniform, and unchanging. It's sensory deprivation on a planetary scale. The medical realities of Mars are perhaps the most sobering of all. On Earth, if you have a heart attack, stroke, or traumatic injury, you can be in a hospital within minutes or hours. On Mars, the nearest hospital is 9 months away, and that's only if the planets are aligned correctly. A broken bone that would be a minor inconvenience on Earth could be a death sentence on Mars. Appendicitis, kidney stones, dental abscesses, routine medical emergencies that require immediate intervention simply cannot be adequately treated with the limited equipment and expertise available on a Mars mission. Consider surgery in low gravity. Blood doesn't pool the way surgeons expect. Fluids behave differently. Even with the best training, a surgeon who has only operated in Earth gravity would be working in an alien environment. And that's assuming you even have a surgeon. The first Mars missions will have perhaps 4 to 6 people. You can't bring every medical specialist. The crew doctor might be trained in emergency medicine, but not neurosurgery, obstetrics, or oncology. When something goes wrong outside their expertise, people will die. The pharmaceutical challenge is equally daunting. Medications have shelf lives, and many degrade faster in high radiation environments. A study on the International Space Station found that many medications lose potency much faster than on Earth. After 9 months traveling to Mars, plus time on the surface, many critical medications would be expired or degraded. You can't just order a refill from a Martian pharmacy. Every medical supply must be brought from Earth, predicted years in advance, and somehow preserved in conditions that actively degrade them. The biological contamination issue works both ways and presents an existential challenge that's rarely discussed honestly. We talk about protecting Mars from Earth microbes, but What about protecting Earth from potential Martian microbes? Even if the probability of life on Mars is small, the consequences of bringing back a Martian pathogen could be catastrophic. Every sample, every piece of equipment, every astronaut returning from Mars would need to be quarantined with absolute certainty. The Apollo astronauts were quarantined for 3 weeks after returning from the sterile Moon. Mars quarantine would need to be far more stringent. But here's the real kicker: we might have already contaminated Mars. Despite our best efforts at sterilization, every Mars rover and lander has carried Earth microbes. Some bacteria and fungi can survive the sterilization process, the journey through space, and potentially even Mars conditions. If we find life on Mars, how will we know if it's truly Martian or just Earth contamination? This question could undermine the entire scientific rationale for going to Mars in the first place. The economic reality is brutal and often hidden behind optimistic projections. The Apollo program cost about $280 billion in today's money to put 12 people on the Moon for a total of about 80 hours of lunar surface time. Mars missions would cost far more. Conservative estimates put a Mars program at $500 billion to $1 trillion. That's just for the first mission. Creating a self-sustaining colony would cost tens of trillions of dollars over decades. SpaceX claims they'll reduce costs dramatically, but even their most optimistic projections put a Mars ticket at $500,000 per person. That's just transportation. It doesn't include the habitat, life support, food, water, or any of the infrastructure needed to actually survive on Mars. The reality is that Mars colonization would be the most expensive undertaking in human history, requiring resources that could solve every problem on Earth many times over. The technological challenges compound exponentially. It's not just about getting to Mars, it's about manufacturing everything you need to survive once you're there. You need to produce fuel for the return journey. That means building a chemical plant on Mars. You need to maintain and repair equipment. That means manufacturing tools and spare parts. You need to expand your habitat. That means producing construction materials. Each of these requires specialized equipment that must be transported from Earth or built on Mars from scratch. The Martian atmosphere is 95% carbon dioxide, which sounds great for plants, but is actually toxic to humans at those concentrations. You'd need massive greenhouses with controlled atmospheres, heating systems for the frigid nights, and artificial lighting to supplement the weak sunlight. The power requirements alone are staggering. Solar panels on Mars produce less than half the power they would on Earth, and they're constantly being covered by dust. Nuclear reactors might be necessary, but launching nuclear materials into space comes with its own risks and political challenges. The social and political challenges might be insurmountable. Who owns Mars? Who governs a Mars colony? What laws apply? The Outer Space Treaty of 1967 prohibits any nation from claiming sovereignty over celestial bodies, but it was written in a different era. If a private company like SpaceX establishes a Mars colony, are they subject to US law? What if colonists declare independence? These aren't theoretical questions, they're fundamental issues that could lead to conflict or even war. Consider the ethical implications. Should we terraform Mars, fundamentally altering another planet to suit our needs? Do we have the right to contaminate Mars with Earth life? If Mars has indigenous microbes, even non-sentient ones, do they have a right to exist without human interference? These questions might seem philosophical, but they have real implications for mission planning and could create political and social opposition to Mars colonization. The timeline problem is perhaps the most overlooked issue. Optimists talk about Mars colonies in the 2030s or 2040s, but every major space project in history has taken longer than predicted. The James Webb Space Telescope was supposed to launch in 2007. It actually launched in 2021. The International Space Station was supposed to be completed in the 1990s. It wasn't finished until 2011. A Mars colony isn't just more complex than these projects, it's exponentially more complex. Even if we started a Crash Mars program today, with unlimited funding, we're probably looking at the 2040s for the first crewed landing and the 2060s or 2070s for anything resembling a permanent base. By then, climate change will have radically altered Earth, artificial intelligence will have transformed society, and we might have technologies that make Mars colonization obsolete. We're planning for a future using today's technology and assumptions, but the future never unfolds the way we expect. The communication infrastructure needed for Mars is mind-boggling. You need relay satellites around Mars to maintain contact with Earth when Mars is on the opposite side of the Sun. You need communication satellites in Mars orbit to connect different surface locations. You need redundancy because if your communication system fails, you're completely cut off from Earth for potentially years. Building and maintaining this infrastructure would require dozens of launches and constant replacement as equipment fails in the harsh radiation environment. Let's talk about something nobody wants to admit. The human body might simply be incompatible with long-term space travel. Recent studies on astronauts have revealed disturbing changes we didn't expect. The shape of the eye changes in microgravity, leading to vision problems that don't fully reverse on return to Earth. Brain scans show structural changes, with cerebrospinal fluid accumulating in ways that might cause permanent cognitive effects. Some astronauts have developed blood clots in the jugular vein, a potentially fatal condition that we didn't even know was a risk until recently. The reproduction question is existential for any permanent colony. We've never seen mammalian conception, pregnancy, or birth in reduced gravity. Mouse experiments on the International Space Station showed abnormal development and high mortality rates. The radiation exposure alone could cause genetic mutations that make healthy reproduction impossible. We might discover that humans simply cannot reproduce successfully on Mars, turning any colony into a one-generation dead end. The terraforming fantasy needs to be addressed. Some people believe we can transform Mars into a second Earth by releasing greenhouse gases, melting the polar ice caps and thickening the atmosphere. The science shows this is virtually impossible with any technology we can imagine. Mars lost its atmosphere because it lacks a magnetic field to protect it from solar wind. Without that magnetic field, any atmosphere we create would slowly be stripped away. Creating an artificial magnetic field for an entire planet is so far beyond our capabilities, it might as well be magic. Even if we could thicken Mars's atmosphere, it would take tens of thousands of years at minimum. The idea that we'll terraform Mars while we can't even stop destroying Earth's already perfect environment is perhaps the height of human hubris. We're failing to manage one planet's climate and somehow think we can engineer another planet's entire biosphere from scratch. The recent discoveries about Mars make colonization even less appealing. The Mars InSight lander detected Marsquakes, revealing that Mars is still geologically active. These aren't like earthquakes with tectonic plates. They're more unpredictable and could damage habitats without warning. Speaking of recent discoveries, if you want to see how our understanding of the cosmos is rapidly evolving and why staying on Earth might be our best option while we figure out the universe's mysteries, check out my video called The Best James Webb Telescope Discoveries Until Now. The James Webb has shown us there are billions of potentially habitable worlds out there, many of which might be far more suitable for life than Mars. The link is in the description and on the card above. Now let's continue. The methane mystery on Mars illustrates how little we understand about the red planet. The Curiosity rover has detected seasonal methane releases that could indicate either geological or biological processes. If it's biological, we have an ethical obligation not to contaminate Mars. If it's geological, it represents unknown chemical processes that could be dangerous to human colonists. Either way, we're talking about colonizing a planet we fundamentally don't understand. The sample return mission problem reveals the true complexity of Mars exploration. NASA and ESA are spending billions just to bring back a few tubes of Martian soil, a mission that won't complete until the 2030s at the earliest. If bringing back a kilogram of rocks is this challenging and expensive, imagine the complexity of bringing back humans. The return journey from Mars requires manufacturing fuel on Mars from the thin atmosphere, a process we've never attempted at scale and which could easily fail, stranding astronauts forever. The legal precedent we're setting is troubling. If SpaceX or another private company establishes a Mars base, they'll essentially be creating a company town on another planet. History shows us that company towns lead to exploitation, abuse, and the denial of basic rights. Imagine being an indentured servant on Mars, unable to leave because you can't afford the return ticket, forced to work in dangerous conditions because the company controls your air supply. It's not science fiction, it's the logical extension of current plans. The opportunity cost is staggering. The trillions of dollars needed for Mars colonization could solve climate change, end world hunger, cure diseases, and lift billions out of poverty. We could build floating cities for climate refugees, develop fusion power, create a post-scarcity economy on Earth. Instead, we're fantasizing about sending a tiny number of people to die on a frozen, irradiated desert planet. It's not visionary, it's a distraction from solving our real problems. The cultural and linguistic isolation would be profound. Over generations, Mars colonists would develop their own dialect, then their own language. Their culture would diverge from Earth's. They'd become aliens to us, and we to them. The idea of maintaining a unified human species across two planets is naive. We can't even maintain unity on one planet. Mars colonists would eventually see themselves as Martians, not humans, potentially leading to interplanetary conflict. The mineral and resource extraction argument for Mars colonies doesn't hold up to scrutiny. It costs about $10,000 per kilogram to send anything to Mars, and potentially more to bring it back. There's no mineral valuable enough to justify those transportation costs. Asteroid mining makes far more economic sense, and even that's questionable. The idea that Mars will somehow be economically profitable is fantasy economics that ignores basic math. The energy requirements for a Mars colony are staggering and often glossed over in optimistic projections. Heating habitats through the Martian night, running life support systems, powering greenhouses, operating manufacturing equipment, and producing fuel for return journeys. All of this requires massive amounts of continuous power. Solar panels on Mars are only 43% as effective as on Earth, and dust storms can reduce their output to near zero for months. The 2018 global dust storm on Mars lasted for over 3 months, blocking 99% of sunlight. Any colony dependent on solar power would have died. Nuclear power seems like the obvious solution, but it creates new problems. You need to transport enriched uranium or plutonium through Earth's atmosphere, risking catastrophic contamination if the rocket fails. You need nuclear engineers on Mars to operate and maintain the reactors. You need to deal with nuclear waste on a planet where you can't just bury it and forget about it. A nuclear accident on Mars would contaminate one of the few areas suitable for human habitation, potentially forever. The manufacturing challenge is fractal. Every solution creates new problems that require more solutions. To make concrete on Mars, you need water, which is frozen and contaminated. To purify water, you need filters and chemicals. To make filters, you need specialized materials. To produce those materials, you need mining equipment. To build mining equipment, you need metals. To refine metals, you need high-temperature furnaces. To power furnaces, you need massive energy infrastructure. Each step requires technology and expertise that must be brought from Earth or developed from scratch. Let's address the backup planet argument honestly. The scenarios that would make Earth uninhabitable, nuclear war, climate catastrophe, asteroid impact, would still leave Earth more habitable than Mars has ever been. Even a post-apocalyptic Earth would have breathable air, survivable atmospheric pressure, protection from radiation, and liquid water. The technology needed to survive on Mars could more easily be used to survive any catastrophe on Earth. Underground bunkers in Antarctica would be paradise compared to Mars' surface habitats. The genetic bottleneck problem is severe. A sustainable human population needs genetic diversity to avoid inbreeding and genetic drift. Studies suggest you need at least 10,000 people for a genetically stable population, though some argue you could manage with as few as 160 if you carefully control breeding. But controlling breeding means enforcing who can have children with whom, a totalitarian nightmare that violates basic human rights. A small Mars colony would face the choice between genetic collapse or reproductive tyranny. The muscle and bone problem goes beyond just weakness. In Mars gravity, your cardiovascular system adapts. Your heart shrinks because it doesn't need to work as hard. Your blood volume decreases. Your bones don't just lose mass, they change structure, becoming more brittle. After years on Mars, returning to Earth wouldn't just be difficult, it could be fatal. Your heart might not be able to pump blood to your brain against Earth's gravity. You could suffer multiple fractures just from walking. We'd be creating a population of medical cripples who can never come home. Recent research on the International Space Station has revealed that spaceflight causes premature aging at the cellular level. Telomeres, the protective caps on chromosomes, lengthen during spaceflight but then shorten rapidly upon return, a process associated with aging and cancer. DNA damage accumulates faster than on Earth. The combination of radiation, microgravity, and stress creates a perfect storm for accelerated aging. Mars colonists might age 2 to 3 times faster than Earth humans, turning a 20-year mission into a 40 or 60-year biological toll. The dust storm problem is worse than most people realize. Mars dust storms can be global, lasting months and covering the entire planet. The dust is so fine it behaves almost like a fluid, getting into sealed containers and equipment. It's electrostatically charged, so it sticks to everything and is almost impossible to clean off. It's abrasive, wearing down equipment and seals. And it's toxic, containing not just perchlorates, but heavy metals and possibly unknown compounds that could cause cancer or neurological damage with chronic exposure. The psychological reality of Mars is a sensory deprivation nightmare. No rain, no snow, no clouds, except thin, wispy ones. No animals, no plants, no changing seasons in any meaningful way. The sky is a sickly butterscotch color during the day and green at sunset, the opposite of Earth. The sun is noticeably smaller and dimmer. There are no familiar stars at night because you're seeing them from a different angle. Every single sensory input that evolution has programmed you to find comforting is absent. It's an alien world in the truest sense. The maintenance burden would be crushing. Everything breaks down faster in the Mars environment. Seals fail from the extreme temperature cycling. Metal fatigues from the constant thermal expansion and contraction. Electronics degrade from radiation. Solar panels lose efficiency from dust accumulation. Mechanical parts wear out from the abrasive dust. On Earth, we have entire industries dedicated to maintenance and repair. On Mars, a small crew would need to handle everything themselves, spending most of their time just keeping systems running rather than doing science or expansion. The ethical implications of children on Mars are horrifying when examined closely. A child born on Mars didn't choose that life. They're condemned to never experience Earth, never swim in an ocean, climb a tree, feel rain, or breathe unfiltered air. They're born into a prison they can never leave, with a body that might be too weak to ever visit their species' home planet. Is it ethical to condemn a child to such an existence? Do parents have the right to make that choice for their unborn children? The contamination problem works both ways and is unsolvable with current technology. Every time astronauts go outside, they risk bringing Mars dust and potential microbes into the habitat. Every time they maintain equipment, they risk contaminating Mars with Earth microbes. The spacesuits themselves become contaminated inside and out. There's no practical way to maintain perfect biological isolation while also doing the work needed to survive. We'll contaminate Mars, and Mars will contaminate us. The food production crisis on Mars is far worse than optimistic projections suggest. Growing enough food to sustain even a small colony would require massive greenhouses with perfect environmental control. But plants on Earth evolved with specific day-night cycles, seasonal variations, and light spectra. Mars has a 24-hour and 37-minute day, throwing off circadian rhythms in both plants and humans. The light spectrum is different, lacking certain wavelengths plants use for critical processes. Even with artificial lighting, we'd be fighting millions of years of evolution. Hydroponic systems seem like the solution, but they require precisely balanced nutrient solutions, constant monitoring, and regular replacement of components that degrade. A single pump failure, contamination event, or nutrient imbalance could destroy an entire crop. On Earth, we have backup systems, multiple suppliers, and the ability to import food from elsewhere. On Mars, one agricultural failure means starvation. The psychological pressure on whoever manages food production would be unbearable, knowing that a single mistake could doom the entire colony. The water recycling challenge reveals the disgusting reality of Mars life that promotional videos ignore. Every drop of water must be recycled from urine, feces, sweat, and humidity in the air. The International Space Station achieves about 93% water recovery, but that still requires regular resupply from Earth. On Mars, you'd need near 100% efficiency. The systems would need to run perfectly for years without replacement parts. When they inevitably break down, colonists would face the choice between dying of thirst or drinking increasingly contaminated water. Let's talk about the reality of death on Mars, a topic everyone avoids. People will die from accidents, medical emergencies, suicide, or simple system failures. What do you do with the bodies? You can't bury them in the toxic soil. Cremation requires enormous energy you can't spare. Storing bodies in the habitat is a health hazard and psychological nightmare. Some have suggested composting human remains for fertilizer, but that's a pathogen risk and psychological horror. The first funeral on Mars will shatter any remaining illusions about it being humanity's bright future. The manufacturing delusion needs to be exposed. Mars advocates talk about using 3D printing and in-situ resource utilization as if these are mature technologies. In reality, 3D printing requires specific raw materials, precise conditions, and can only create certain types of objects. You can't 3D print electronics, seals, lubricants, or complex alloys. The idea that colonists will mine ore, refine it, and manufacture complex equipment is fantasy. It took humanity thousands of years to develop metallurgy on Earth with breathable air and abundant resources. On Mars, in spacesuits, with limited tools, impossible. The social dynamics of a Mars colony would be a powder keg. You're trapped with the same small group of people forever, with no privacy, no escape, and no hope of change. Every personality conflict becomes a survival threat. On Earth, people can change jobs, move cities, find new social circles. On Mars, you're stuck. Historical examples of isolated groups, Polar expeditions, remote military outposts, submarine crews show that even highly trained, carefully selected groups develop severe conflicts. Now imagine that lasting not months, but lifetimes. The genetic modification temptation reveals the slippery slope of Mars colonization. Some scientists suggest genetically engineering humans to better survive Mars, increasing radiation resistance, improving low-gravity adaptation, or even more radical changes. But this means creating a new species of human, one that might not be able to interbreed with Earth humans. We'd be fracturing our species, creating genetic castes, and opening the door to a biological apartheid. The ethical implications are staggering. Recent discoveries about the Martian underground make colonization even more problematic. Ground-penetrating radar has revealed that Mars has extensive underground cave systems and lava tubes. While these might seem like ideal ready-made habitats, they're geological unknowns. They could be unstable, filled with toxic gases, or harbor unknown chemistry. Exploring them would be incredibly dangerous, but not exploring them means missing potentially the only viable habitat option. It's a catch-22 that could doom early colonies. The economic model for Mars colonization is pure fantasy. Proponents talk about exporting rare minerals, scientific discoveries, or even tourism, but the transportation costs make any export economically impossible. Scientific discoveries can be made more cheaply with robots. And tourism? Paying millions of dollars for a 9-month journey to walk around in a spacesuit on a dead planet? The market would be vanishingly small. There's no viable economic model that doesn't require massive, continuous subsidies from Earth forever. The political reality is that Mars colonization would likely trigger a new colonial race. If one nation or company establishes a successful Mars presence, others will feel compelled to compete. This could militarize space, violate international treaties, and create conflicts that spill back to Earth. The Antarctic Treaty has kept Antarctica peaceful and scientific, but it's already under pressure from resource interests. A Mars colony would face far more pressure with no international enforcement mechanism millions of miles away. The time delay problem extends beyond communication to every aspect of colony management. Software updates, technical support, medical consultations, legal decisions. Everything has that minimum 28-minute round-trip delay. In emergencies, colonists are entirely on their own. A critical software bug, a medical emergency requiring specialist knowledge, a life support system failing in an unexpected way. By the time Earth even knows about it, everyone could be dead. This isolation is unprecedented in human history. The robotic alternative exposes the human colonization plan as ego-driven rather than practical. Robots can explore Mars more safely, cheaply, and effectively than humans. They don't need life support, can work 24/7, and can be designed for specific tasks. The scientific return from Mars rovers has been extraordinary. Adding humans to the mix increases costs by orders of magnitude, while actually reducing scientific productivity due to the massive overhead of keeping humans alive. If the goal is science, robots are better. If the goal is colonization for its own sake, we need to question why. The immune system degradation on Mars represents a ticking time bomb that could destroy any colony. Research on the International Space Station shows that spaceflight significantly weakens the human immune system. White blood cell counts drop, antibody production decreases, and dormant viruses like herpes reactivate. This happens in just 6 months in low Earth orbit with Earth's partial magnetic field protection. On Mars, with higher radiation and permanent exposure, immune systems would be devastated. A simple cold could become deadly. Any infectious disease would spread through the colony like wildfire through a population with AIDS-level immune suppression. The pregnancy and childbirth nightmare on Mars goes beyond just gravity concerns. The radiation exposure during pregnancy would cause devastating birth defects. The lack of proper medical facilities means any complication, preeclampsia, breech birth, hemorrhaging, would likely be fatal for mother and child. Even if a healthy baby was somehow born, their developing immune system would be bombarded by radiation, their bones would form incorrectly in low gravity, and their eyes might develop improperly due to the different light conditions. We'd be creating a generation of disabled children. Let's address the terraforming delusion with hard numbers. Mars has about 1% of Earth's atmosphere. To make it breathable, we'd need to increase the atmospheric pressure by at least 50 times and somehow convert the carbon dioxide to oxygen. The total amount of CO2 on Mars, including the polar caps and absorbed in rocks, is only enough to create an atmosphere about 7% as thick as Earth's, still far too thin to breathe and too thin to warm the planet significantly. We'd need to import gases from elsewhere in the solar system, a project that would take millions of years with any conceivable technology. The magnetic field problem is insurmountable. Earth's magnetic field is generated by convection in our molten iron core. Mars's core has largely solidified, which is why it lost its magnetic field billions of years ago. Some propose creating an artificial magnetic field at the Mars-Sun L1 point, but this would require a magnetic field generator the size of a small moon, positioned precisely in space, maintained forever. The energy requirements alone are beyond anything humanity has ever contemplated. Without a magnetic field, any atmosphere we create would be stripped away by solar wind over thousands of years. The recent discovery of recurring slope lineae, RSL, on Mars created excitement about flowing water, but the reality is far grimmer. These dark streaks that appear seasonally are likely caused by either tiny amounts of briny water or dry, granular flows. If it is water, it's so salty it's toxic to all known life. The salt concentration is near saturation. Imagine trying to drink water from the Dead Sea, except it's also at -50 degrees Celsius and contains perchlorates. This isn't the life-giving water of science fiction, it's a toxic chemical soup. The cave-in risk for underground habitats is severe and poorly understood. Mars has different geology than Earth, with different rock types and structural forces. Mars quakes occur regularly, and we don't understand their patterns or triggers. Building underground seems safe from radiation, but you're betting your life on geological stability we can't properly assess. A cave-in would be catastrophic, no heavy rescue equipment, no way to dig people out quickly, and no backup shelter if your primary habitat is destroyed. The 3D printing fantasy needs a reality check. Current 3D printers require very specific feedstock materials, precise plastic filaments, or metal powders with exact properties. You can't just shovel Mars dirt into a printer and get useful objects. Creating printer feedstock from raw Martian materials would require an entire chemical processing industry. The printers themselves have hundreds of precision parts that wear out and need replacement. When your 3D printer breaks, you can't 3D print the replacement parts you need. It's a chicken and egg problem that marketing videos conveniently ignore. The mental health crisis would be unprecedented. Seasonal affective disorder affects millions on Earth just from reduced winter sunlight. On Mars, the sun is dimmer year-round, the sky is never blue, and there's no nature to provide psychological relief. Studies show that lack of natural exposure increases depression, anxiety, and cognitive decline. Add isolation, confinement, constant danger, and no hope of return, and you have a recipe for widespread psychological breakdown. Suicide rates would likely be astronomical, creating a cascade effect on the remaining colonists. The equipment reliability problem compounds exponentially. On Earth, we accept that cars need maintenance every few thousand miles, appliances last maybe 10 years, and even buildings need major repairs every few decades. On Mars, every single piece of equipment is life-critical, Your habitat, life support, water recycling, power generation, food production, communication systems all must work perfectly all the time. But in the harsh Martian environment, everything degrades faster. You need backup systems for your backup systems, each adding weight, complexity, and more points of failure. The cultural stagnation of a small Mars colony is rarely discussed. Human culture thrives on diversity, interaction, and new influences. A Mars colony of even a few hundred people would be culturally impoverished. No new art, music, or literature from Earth would arrive in real time. No traveling performers, no cultural exchange, no immigration bringing fresh perspectives. The colony would develop an increasingly insular, potentially toxic culture. Historical examples of isolated communities show they often develop rigid hierarchies, extreme conservatism, and resistance to change, hardly the dynamic future humanity needs. The asteroid impact risk on Mars is actually higher than on Earth. Mars is closer to the asteroid belt and has a thinner atmosphere that provides less protection. Impact craters on Mars show that large impacts happen regularly in geological time. Without a thick atmosphere to burn up smaller asteroids, even relatively small impacts could destroy a colony. Early warning systems would be limited and there's no way to deflect or evacuate. Colonists would live with the constant risk of instant annihilation from above. The cellular damage from Mars radiation goes beyond cancer risk. It fundamentally alters human biology at every level. Cosmic rays don't just damage DNA, they create cascading free radicals that destroy proteins, lipids, and cellular membranes. The brain is especially vulnerable. Recent studies show cosmic radiation causes brain inflammation, destroys synapses, and triggers protein misfolding similar to Alzheimer's disease. After just a few years on Mars, colonists would likely suffer significant cognitive decline, memory loss, confusion, personality changes, and eventually dementia. We'd be creating a colony of people slowly losing their minds. The reproduction crisis extends to the entire ecosystem needed for human survival. It's not just human babies we need to worry about. Any sustainable colony needs a functioning ecosystem, bacteria for waste processing, fungi for decomposition, insects for pollination, and countless microorganisms for soil health. But we have no idea how any of these organisms reproduce or function in Mars' gravity and radiation. The nitrogen-fixing bacteria essential for plant growth might not work. The gut bacteria humans need for digestion might mutate or die. We could successfully get humans to Mars only to watch our biological support systems collapse. Let's destroy the mining fantasy with engineering reality. To mine on Mars, you need excavators, haulers, crushers, and processing equipment. This machinery requires hydraulic fluids that freeze at Mars temperatures, lubricants that evaporate in low pressure, and seals that become brittle and crack. Metal becomes brittle in extreme cold. Dust clogs everything. Equipment that lasts decades on Earth would fail in months on Mars. And when it breaks, you can't call for replacement parts. You'd need an entire industrial supply chain just to keep mining equipment running, which requires more mining equipment. It's an impossible recursive loop. The power storage problem makes sustainable energy impossible. Solar panels only work during the day, but Mars nights are brutal and long. Batteries degrade rapidly in extreme cold. The temperature swings cause expansion and contraction that breaks connections and cracks components. Chemical batteries lose capacity. Mechanical storage like flywheels require perfect vacuum seals, and fuel cells require water you can't spare. Nuclear reactors seem like the only option, but they require cooling water, create radioactive waste, and need expert maintenance. One reactor failure and your colony freezes to death in the dark. Recent analysis of Martian weather patterns reveals another killer. Global dust storms are electrically charged. These aren't just visibility problems, they're massive electrical phenomena that could destroy electronics, communication systems, and solar panels. The static discharge could electrocute astronauts in spacesuits. The triboelectric charging could cause explosions in fuel production facilities. We have no technology to protect against planet-wide electrical storms that last months. One bad storm could wipe out a colony's entire technological infrastructure. The bone deterioration problem is even worse than initially thought. It's not just density loss, the entire bone structure remodels in low gravity. Trabecular bone, the spongy interior that provides strength, deteriorates preferentially. Weight-bearing joints like hips and knees degrade rapidly. But here's the truly terrifying part. This process is likely irreversible. Studies on astronauts show that bone structure doesn't fully recover even years after returning to Earth. Mars colonists wouldn't just be weaker, they'd be permanently disabled by Earth standards. The manufacturing complexity spiral shows why self-sufficiency is impossible. To make computer chips, you need ultra-pure silicon, rare earth elements, and fabrication facilities that cost billions on Earth. To make those facilities, you need precision machinery. To make that machinery, you need specialized alloys. To make those alloys, you need a metallurgical industry. Each layer requires massive infrastructure, specialized knowledge, and materials that might not even exist on Mars. The idea that a small colony could manufacture modern technology is laughable. They'd be dependent on Earth for every advanced component forever. The social experiment of Mars colonization would likely create the worst aspects of human society. Isolated communities with limited resources inevitably develop strict hierarchies, resource hoarding, and US versus them mentalities. Add the stress of constant survival pressure, and you have conditions ripe for authoritarianism. The colony leadership would have life and death power over everyone. Dissent could be punished by reduced rations or dangerous work assignments. Democracy requires freedom of movement and association. Impossible when leaving means death. Mars colonies would likely become dictatorships by necessity. The genetic bottleneck in mathematics is brutal. Even with a carefully selected initial population, genetic drift would cause rapid loss of diversity. Harmful recessive genes would become common. Within a few generations, genetic disorders would skyrocket. The colony would face an impossible choice: enforce a eugenic breeding program that violates human rights, or watch their children suffer from increasing genetic diseases. Either path leads to horror: a totalitarian breeding program, or a population plagued by hereditary illness. The time perception problem would fracture human society. A Mars day is 24 hours and 37 minutes. Close to Earth, but not identical. This seemingly small difference compounds daily. After a month, Mars and Earth schedules are offset by a full day. Coordinating with Earth becomes increasingly difficult. Colonists would slowly drift out of sync with Earth civilization. Combined with communication delays, this would create profound psychological isolation. Mars colonists would literally be living in a different time, accelerating cultural and social divergence. The closed-loop life support impossibility becomes clear when you examine the numbers. The International Space Station, with all of Earth's resources supporting it, still can't achieve closed-loop life support. They lose about 10% of water despite recycling, require constant air resupply, and produce waste they must dispose of. On Mars, you'd need near-perfect recycling efficiency maintained for decades without replacement parts. Every seal that leaks, every filter that clogs, every pump that fails means precious resources lost forever. The colony would slowly suffocate, dehydrate, or starve as systems degraded. The microbiome collapse scenario represents one of the most underappreciated existential threats to Mars colonization. Humans aren't individuals, we're walking ecosystems hosting trillions of microorganisms essential for our survival. These microbes help digest food, produce vitamins, regulate our immune system, and even influence our mental health. On Mars, the radiation, different gravity, isolation from Earth's microbial reservoir, and sterile environment would devastate this microbiome. Antibiotics would become necessary more often due to weakened immunity, further destroying beneficial bacteria. Within years, colonists would suffer from malnutrition despite adequate food, immune disorders, and potentially fatal digestive system failures. The spare parts crisis reveals the mathematical impossibility of self-sufficiency. A modern habitat requires thousands of specialized components: seals, bearings, electronics, filters, valves, sensors. Each has a different lifespan and failure mode. Statistical analysis shows that for a colony of just 100 people to maintain basic life support for 50 years, they'd need millions of spare parts. The mass would exceed what could realistically be transported from Earth. Manufacturing them on Mars would require hundreds of specialized industries. Missing even one critical component type could doom the colony. It's a logistical nightmare that no amount of planning can solve. Let's examine the nuclear reactor reality that Mars advocates don't want to discuss. Small modular reactors seem perfect for Mars until you consider the details. They require highly enriched uranium or plutonium, materials so dangerous that launching them risks contaminating Earth's atmosphere if the rocket fails. On Mars, cooling is a massive problem. Reactors need water or gas cooling, but water is precious, and Mars's thin atmosphere can't effectively remove heat. Maintenance requires specialized technicians and equipment. Refueling requires a supply chain that doesn't exist. And nuclear waste on Mars can't be safely stored. It would contaminate one of the few areas suitable for human habitation. The agricultural collapse waiting to happen stems from our poor understanding of plant biology in non-Earth conditions. Plants evolved with Earth's specific gravity, magnetic field, radiation levels, and light spectrum. On Mars, root growth is abnormal, water doesn't move through soil properly, and photosynthesis is impaired. But the real killer is pollination and reproduction. Many food plants require specific pollinators or environmental cues to fruit. Without Earth's seasonal changes, day-length variations, and atmospheric pressure, many crops simply won't produce food. Genetic modifications might help, but that requires a biotechnology industry that a small colony can't support. Recent studies on confined environment psychology reveal horrifying implications for Mars colonies. The Mars 500 experiment showed that even highly motivated volunteers in a simulated Mars mission developed severe psychological problems. Sleep disorders, depression, and social withdrawal were common. One crew member became so dysfunctional he stopped participating entirely. This was on Earth, with full gravity, real-time communication, and the knowledge they could leave any time. Actual Mars colonists would face incomparably worse conditions, with no escape. Murder-suicides, psychotic breaks, and complete social breakdown aren't just possible, they're probable. The child development catastrophe extends beyond physical deformities. Children need diverse social interactions, educational opportunities, and exposure to nature for proper psychological development. A Mars colony could provide none of these. Children would grow up in a sterile, confined environment with the same small group of people, no animals, no weather, no seasons. Studies of children in extremely restricted environments show severe developmental delays, social dysfunction, and mental illness. We'd be creating a generation of psychologically damaged individuals incapable of normal human relationships. The equipment synchronization problem creates cascading failures. Every system in a Mars habitat must work in harmony: life support, power, water recycling, temperature control, communication. When one system degrades, it stresses all others. For example, if water recycling efficiency drops, you need more power for processing. This strains the power system, reducing energy for heating. Lower temperatures stress seals and batteries, causing more failures. Each problem multiplies into others. On Earth, we have redundancy and resources to break these cascade failures. On Mars, One system degradation could trigger a colony-wide collapse. The legal nightmare of Mars crimes and governance would tear colonies apart. If someone commits murder on Mars, who investigates? Who prosecutes? What laws apply? Where do you imprison them in a colony where every space is essential? The Outer Space Treaty is vague about jurisdiction and enforcement. A Mars colony would need police, courts, and jails, infrastructure that diverts resources from survival. But without law enforcement, disputes could escalate to violence. The first serious crime on Mars would create a constitutional crisis with no clear resolution. The false economy of Mars manufacturing becomes clear when examining supply chains. On Earth, making a simple electronic device involves materials and components from dozens of countries, hundreds of companies, and thousands of workers. The idea that a Mars colony could replicate this is absurd. They'd lack rare Earth elements for electronics, specific alloys for machinery, and countless specialized chemicals. Every missing material would require either imports from Earth, defeating the purpose of self-sufficiency, or accepting inferior substitutes that compromise safety and functionality. The evolutionary divergence problem poses existential questions about human identity. In the low gravity and high radiation of Mars, natural selection would favor different traits than on Earth. Over generations, Mars humans would evolve differently, potentially developing radiation resistance at the cost of other functions, or adapting to low gravity in ways that make them increasingly alien to Earth humans. We wouldn't just be creating a colony, we'd be creating a new branch of humanity that might eventually see Earth humans as a different species. This biological divergence could lead to the ultimate fragmentation of humanity. The communication breakdown goes beyond time delays to fundamental information architecture. Earth's internet, databases, and knowledge repositories would be inaccessible in real time. Mars would need its own duplicate of essential human knowledge, but maintaining and updating this would be impossible. Scientific journals, technical manuals, educational resources, all would be frozen at the point of departure. The colony's knowledge base would immediately begin diverging from Earth's. Within decades, Mars colonists would be working with outdated information, unable to benefit from Earth's continued advancement. They'd become a technological backwater, frozen in time. As we reach the conclusion of this sobering analysis, let's confront the ultimate delusion, the idea that Mars represents humanity's future. The red planet isn't a backup Earth, it's a death trap masquerading as an adventure. Every challenge we've discussed compounds the others, creating a web of impossibilities that no amount of optimism can overcome. We're not talking about technical problems that engineering can solve. We're facing fundamental incompatibilities between human biology and Martian reality. The cumulative stress on human physiology would create a cascade of failures that doom any colony. Radiation destroying DNA and brain tissue, gravity weakening bones and muscles, toxic dust accumulating in lungs, psychological breakdown from isolation, immune system collapse, microbiome destruction. These aren't separate challenges, but synergistic disasters. A colonist after 5 years on Mars would be cognitively impaired, physically crippled, psychologically broken, and dying of multiple organ failures. This isn't colonization, it's a slow-motion mass suicide with $1 trillion price tag. The recent push for Mars colonization by billionaires reveals an uncomfortable truth. This is about ego, not humanity's survival. These individuals won't be the ones dying on Mars. They're selling a dream they'll never personally experience, funded by resources that could solve actual problems on Earth. It's the ultimate expression of privilege, destroying Earth while fantasizing about escaping to a planet that's already dead. The engineers and scientists who actually go to Mars will pay the price for these fantasies with their lives. Consider the opportunity cost in human terms. The $1 trillion needed for a basic Mars colony could provide clean water to every human on Earth, end malnutrition, cure multiple diseases, and still have money left over for education and infrastructure. We could build floating cities for climate refugees, develop fusion power, create vertical farms to feed billions, and restore Earth's ecosystems. Instead, we're planning to send a few dozen people to die slowly on a planet that will never, can never support human life. The thermodynamic reality is inescapable. Life on Earth exists because of energy flows, from the sun through plants to animals, from ocean currents distributing heat, from geological processes recycling nutrients. Mars has none of these energy flows. It's thermodynamically dead. Creating artificial energy flows would require more energy input than the colony could ever produce. It's like trying to push water uphill forever, physically possible but energetically unsustainable. Mars colonies would be energy sinks, consuming vast resources to maintain tiny bubbles of life in an ocean of death. The genetic editing temptation reveals how Mars colonization could destroy what it means to be human. As challenges mount, the pressure to genetically modify colonists would become overwhelming. Radiation resistance, low-gravity adaptation, ability to digest different foods, even ability to see in different light spectra, each modification moving Mars humans further from Earth humans. Within centuries, they might not even be the same species. We're not spreading humanity to the stars, we're fracturing it into incompatible fragments. The discovery of extremophiles on Earth, organisms thriving in conditions once thought impossible for life, is often cited as hope for Mars. But this argument misses the point. These organisms evolved over billions of years to handle specific extreme conditions. Humans can't evolve fast enough to adapt to Mars, and genetic engineering can't replicate billions of years of evolution. We're not extremophiles. We're fragile organisms that need an extremely specific environment to survive. Mars isn't just outside our comfort zone, it's outside our survival zone. The philosophical implications cut to the heart of human meaning. If we can't survive on Mars, the most Earth-like planet in our solar system, then we're truly alone. The universe isn't hostile to life, it's indifferent to it. Earth isn't just our home, it's the only home we'll ever have. This isn't defeatism, it's wisdom. Recognizing our limits allows us to focus on what matters, protecting and cherishing the one planet where we know life can thrive. The Mars colonization myth distracts from the real challenges facing humanity. Climate change, biodiversity collapse, inequality, pandemic disease, these are solvable problems that require the resources and attention being wasted on Mars fantasies. Every dollar spent on Mars colonization is a dollar not spent on Earth restoration. Every brilliant mind working on Mars habitats could be working on sustainable Earth habitats. We're fiddling with Mars while Earth burns. The cultural impact of accepting Mars colonization's impossibility would be profound but ultimately liberating. Instead of escaping fantasies, we'd have to confront our problems. Instead of a disposable planet mentality, we'd develop true sustainability. Instead of cosmic colonialism, we'd embrace cosmic humility. We're not destined to spread across the universe. We're destined to be Earth's caretakers, the only known consciousness in a vast, unconscious cosmos. Let me leave you with this thought. Earth isn't just where we happen to be, it's where we belong. Every atom in your body was forged in stars and assembled by Earth's biosphere over billions of years. You're not on Earth, you are Earth, temporarily organized into human form. Mars isn't the next chapter of human history. It's a distraction from writing Earth's next chapter well. The truth is both humbling and empowering. We're not going to Mars, not in any meaningful, sustainable way. But that's okay. We have an entire planet here that needs our attention, our innovation, and our care. The same technologies being developed for Mars, closed-loop life support, efficient recycling, renewable energy, could transform Earth into a paradise for all life. The challenge isn't escaping Earth, it's becoming worthy of it. So the next time someone talks about Mars as humanity's backup planet, remind them that Earth isn't just our first choice, it's our only choice. The red planet will remain what it's always been, a beautiful light in our night sky, a subject for robots to explore, and a reminder that in all the vast cosmos, there's no place like home. Our future isn't out there among the stars. It's right here on the pale blue dot that Carl Sagan reminded us is the only home we've ever known. And that's not a limitation. It's an invitation to make this world everything it can be. If you are still watching, make sure to subscribe to the channel and give a thumbs up. And I am sure you will love this other video at the left side of the screen. What if our universe is inside a black hole? In this video, we explore the very discussed theory that our entire universe could exist within the event horizon of a massive black hole in a higher dimensional parent universe. See you there.